Hi, welcome to episode 3 of our Horizon HowTo sessions. Today with me is Sander again.
Hi.
Sander, welcome. What are we going to do today?
Today we're going to be diving into Dynamic Environment Manager. So we're going to look at the folder structure, we're going to install the applications, we're going to fix the user profiles and some user settings. So this is going to be a big one.
Nice. But first of all, I'm going to draw something on the lightboard about Dynamic Environment Manager. So today we're going to zoom in on the virtual machine we created in the previous series. Every machine has its local C drive, which contains the operating system. This C drive is also a VMDK file and is stored on the data store. When a user logs in, Dynamic Environment Manager will automatically load all kinds of user and computer settings onto the system. These can be settings containing settings from GPOs, file settings, registry settings, logon task. The possibilities are almost endless. Next to these settings, the user profile is loaded onto the system. And the great part about Dynamic Environment Manager is that it will segment your profile, which means that every application or Windows setting is stored in a separate zip file. And this is really great because if you remember roaming profiles, they were a big bucket, almost something like a big bucket, and if something broke in your profile, you had to wipe your whole profile and do everything again. Now, if something breaks here, we can just reset it and all the other settings will remain intact. Another great part about Dynamic Environment Manager is that it's really lightweight, because all these settings are stored on a file share on a file server. And because this is all stored on a file server, you do not require any other service in your infrastructure or a database, for example. Now let's go to Sander and he will show you how to configure these file shares.
Right, thank you, Aga. So as you mentioned, this is all going to be based on a file system on a server. So I've took the liberty to start up the file server we have here. And we've already created the shares that we'll be using. So we've created 2 shares, which is the first is Dynamic Environment Manager config. That's going to be where all the settings go. And the second one is going to be the profiles. Now, in order to set this up, we need to set specific sharing permissions. So let's take a look at those. And I will be going to the sharing tab. Obviously, as first we shared it. And then when we go to the advanced settings, we can view the permissions. And then you'll see that the Dynamic Environment Manager users, so our basic end users, only have read permissions, and the administrators have full control.
Yeah, that's because of the config, right? Users are not allowed to change anything inside the config.
Exactly, yeah, they don't need access to that. Then we take a look at the NTFS permissions, and there we basically see the same thing. So we see that the administrators have full control, and the users have read and execute. So they can't make changes, but they should be able to run things that are based in these folders.
Yeah. And we also added the domain computers because there's also a small piece of computer environment which we can manage now with VMware DEM.
That makes it so dynamic. So then we'll go to the second folder, which is the profiles. That's where all of our profiles will be stored in neat little packages. So we have that shared. Go back to the advanced properties, and this time we see that the users have write permissions because it's their profile. They need to be able to change that. Yep. And obviously the admins will still have full control. And if we go back to the NTFS permissions for that, go to advanced, then we'll see that they have special permissions. And what's so special about these, you ask? That is because we need to give them read permissions and the permissions to create folders as well, which is applied to this folder only. Why is that?
Right. Because, well, it's the user profile and you don't want users to write in other profiles. So this is why it's applied to only this folder. Yeah.
So basically they would be able to look up their own folder, but they'll only be able to enter their own folder and they won't make changes there. So these same permissions are for the domain computers, as we mentioned in the past, and again, full control for the administrators.
Right. So, looks good to me.
Looks good to me too.
In the last episode, I mentioned to upload the ADMX files onto the policy definitions folder. So let's take a look at my screen and configure the GPOs for Dynamic Environment Manager. So I've opened up the domain controller. I copied the ADMX files to the policy definitions folder, and I'm going to start the group policy management console. I've already created a default DEM configuration group policy, and we are going to edit it so when users log on, they will get the right config share and the right locations for their profiles. So first of all, we're going. These are user settings, so we're going to configure the user configuration. We will open up policies, administrative templates, VMware DEM, and we will edit the Flex engine. So the first setting we are going to edit is the config share. The share Sander has created on our file server, and I'm just going to copy it real quickly from a notepad. We enable it, and the ADMX files are already prepared, so you just have to copy paste the location to your configuration share. Do not delete this general, because you will get some error messages. Click OK. And on to the next one, which is the Flex engine logging, because when we log on, a lot of things are happening during this period, and we want that to be logged. So for troubleshooting when things go wrong. Mm-hmm. These log files are located on the profile share. So we copy the profile share, and we again copy paste it in the first part of the line, and make sure the username /log stays intact. What we also do is click OK.
Sounds reasonable.
Next up are the profile archives. Self-explanatory. Copy paste the profile share location, and again we click OK. After that, the profile archive backup folder is, we enable this. We copy paste.
And I can imagine it's going to be very easy to accidentally delete a slash there or mess up your entire configuration that way, so pay attention.
In a lot of cases we hide the backup folder. In this case we're not going to do this today. The same for the number of backups per profile, and also we just leave this default. Mm-hmm. So the last thing we need to edit is to run the group policy, the Flex engine as a group policy extension.
The Flex engine is what makes the power of DEM very clear, right? So it's the ability to assign a change or an application or a setting, especially every time that the application launches.
Exactly. So these are the basic settings for, no, I forgot one, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
For the Flex engine to save your user profile, you need to enter a command line, which is located at the Windows settings and scripts, which is not a log on, but a log off script, because we want to save files during log off. We add parameters, the script name. This is the path to the Flex engine itself, to the executable. So we copy paste this, and as parameters we say -s. Which is the command line to save everything from the profile to the share. Mm-hmm. So we click OK, we click Apply, click OK again, and we are ready to install the management console. Back to your screen.
All right, so now that we've done all the prep work, let's install Dynamic Environment Manager, which should be pretty straightforward. But let's go through it.
Yeah. It's important to mention you can install the manager on every device, whether it's a Windows 10, your own virtual machine, or in this case we are abusing our Horizon server for this demo purposes, but you can install the management console on any device.
Yeah, yeah. It's not a separate server. We don't need to have extra infrastructure for that. All right, we'll be choosing the default folder to put it in. We're going to choose our installation, and for this we'll be using the custom option because we've got two options. So the top one is the engine, which is basically the agent. We don't want to install that right now. We want that in our image. So I will be disabling that, and I'll be only installing the DEM management console. And yes, I do want to make changes. And as you can see, it's so lightweight, the installation flies right through.
Cool. So let's go back to my screen and do some configurations. So thank you for installing the management console. Let's take a quick look on what is possible here. So when we start the management console, we need to configure the configuration share, which is easy. It's the file share, and we can press OK. Next up, we have several settings we want to enable or not enable. In this case, we are going to enable the computer environment, which is relatively new with VMware DEM. So that's cool to have. We are not using AppV in our environment, so let's just leave this default. Click OK. And this is our management console. Let me put it on a big screen. And the great thing, at least I think it's a great thing, you have easy start button, which basically gives you a fully prepared environment for demo purposes. So perfect for this. Because I installed Office in our image, I'm going to select the Office 2016-2019 Office 365 button and click OK. And what VMware Dynamic Environment Manager will now do is prepare an environment for us with application settings, shortcuts. So let's take a look into that. So the Easy Start has completed. As you can see, the environment is loaded with settings. A couple of default applications like Paint, Notepad and stuff. But also the Office applications are loaded onto the environment. A couple of Windows settings also. But let's take Word as an example. As we can see here, the import, export. This is where all the registry locations and file locations are defined and which are saved into your profile. Because we are using direct flags, which means that if someone would start Word, the settings are loaded from the profile. And when the user closes the application, the settings are automatically saved, which is better than log on and log off from the session. But we need to enable this. So before we enable this, we need to fill in the executable from Word, which is winword.exe. We click OK, and we click Save to save the config file. So this template is created by VMware by the Easy Start button. You can also create config files manually, which you do by the Create Config File option. You have several options to create a template. But also a nice feature is the download config template, which connects you to the internet. You have to fill in your My VMware credentials. And when you do this, let me do this. It loads the VMware Marketplace, and on that marketplace are a lot of predefined application settings made by the community. So, which is great, right? So all type of applications are.
So you don't have to figure out everything for yourself.
Yeah, right.
They'll show you exactly what changes in the registry, what files you need to look out for. Yeah, good stuff.
Exactly. So let's hop on over to the user environment. So this is the user environment tab, which I explained on the lightboard. Here you can configure all settings which will be deployed onto your system. For example, a couple of GPOs you can create here. The Easy Start button has also configured a couple of shortcuts for you. A registry setting, also a trigger task. When you lock your workstation and you unlock it, a message will appear displaying a message for demo purposes. And the great thing about this is you can use conditions to whether a setting will be applied to a user or a computer or not. We also have condition sets for this. Can you explain something about this condition sets?
Yeah, so condition sets are really cool. So basically what it does is that it allows us to make changes based on certain conditions, as you'd say. So that can be either a location. Am I in the main office? Am I based on a certain network segment? Or it can be brought back to applications. So is a certain version of an application installed or a certain files present? And we can build rules upon rules in order to reuse them.
Yeah. And we can reuse those sets onto every type of setting. So when you log on, the Flex engine will check for the condition set the first time, and the second time it will already checkmark you like this is checked, which improves your login time. So that's a really powerful thing. Yeah. Let's go back to the user environment. Let's create a GPO.
All right.
So we manage some templates. We first have to add the template.
And these are the ADMX files that exist outside of your domain situation.
So let's grab the location where I've put all my GPO policies. So I've added a folder. I say this is the folder where my GPOs are located, and I load them onto the environment manager. This can take a couple of minutes depending on how many ADMX files you have in that location. So, but as you can see, they're imported successfully. So let's click OK and click close. So let's create a GPO. I was thinking about editing the start menu for the users. So you can give this a name. We'll just give it a name start menu. And here you can really tune on which setting GPO you want to enable. So we only want to do stuff in the start menu and taskbar for the user. So we only select this one and click Edit Policies. In here, you can search for a specific setting, because when you are filtering, you always look over some settings. And because we're working with instant clones, the users should, in my opinion, only be able to log off. So we will remove the shutdown, restart, and sleep buttons for our users. And we click OK. Right. So this is the setting we save. And also, we're going to add a condition to this. So if you do not set any condition to it, the setting will automatically applied for everyone logging in. But in this case, we only want to do this for the members of them users. You click OK. Click OK again. Select Save.
One that I always like is the privilege elevation as well. Right. That's something I see with my customers very often, because you don't want your customers, or maybe all of your users, to have full privileges, to have full admin rights, but this option to elevate the privileges allows them to install from a certain location into a certain location.
True, yeah. So, and because with app volumes, we are going to use writable volumes, but we do not want to give our users full administrator rights on our environment, but we want to let them install an application from a specific location. So let's configure this. So let's enable privilege elevation. We enable click the Enable button. We also want to enable all child processes run from that location. and we click OK. So privileged elevation is now enabled. What we do now is we create a repository on the file share where users are able to copy the installers they've downloaded themselves to the network, and they are only allowed to run setups with elevated privileges from that location. So let's call this software repository and select the path-based user installed application. And we add the location for from the share where the users are allowed to copy their, which is the fs01/software, and we click OK. So every executable run from this location is started with elevated privileges for our users on in our VDI environment.
Great.
Let's click Save. So the last tab we did not touch is the computer environment, which is relatively new for Dynamic Environment Manager. I believe it's August last year, where they enabled the computer environment settings. As you can see, there are not a lot of settings you can set, but you can do some computer policies or startup tasks or shutdown tasks. But let's open up our image, install the Dynamic Environment Manager agent, and log on to the VDI environment, and shows what we've created.
All right, let's switch it over. All right, so we booted up the master VM, which we shut off to make the snapshot for our images, and I've connected to it, and now we'll be installing the Dynamic Environment Manager agent into this machine, or into this image basically. So we're going to run the installation, and after accepting and obviously reading the agreement and selecting the default folder, I can choose the typical installation, because we saw the options before. I don't want to choose the management console, I just want to use the agent. So typical will do perfectly. And this is where we would normally have to enter a Dynamic Environment Manager key, but we don't have to select such a file because we are using Horizon Enterprise, which includes already this or already licenses it. So it's recognized and we don't need to enter any licenses. So we'll select next and then install the agent. Should be rather quick. And then we are done. That's basically the only change that we're going to do.
Yep.
So right now I will be shutting off the machine and we'll be taking another snapshot.
Right.
Right, and as you see, it's already powered off, so I will be going back to snapshots, and I'll take a new snapshot, and we'll be calling this. What was the name you used before? Instant clone image. Instant clone image. V2.
Yep.
Sounds neat. So we'll be saving that snapshot. Now that we've done that, we'll be able to update our pool with the new snapshot.
Right.
So we'll go back to our connection server, which we can just do in the address bar, obviously, because it's just HTML5. And we'll be logging in there. Thank you. Now, in order to update our pool, we need to go to the pool at first. That sounds pretty self-explanatory, doesn't it?
Right.
And we'll select our production pool. And once we're in here, we'll go to maintain, and then we'll select schedule. And here it shows based on the master VM that we're using. That's the one that's already been in use. We can see the snapshots that exist. So right now we see that the current one that's being used is the standard instant clone image. So what I want to do is schedule the use of the V2 next. I'll click next. And here's a quick thing on how to annoy your users. You could force them all to log off directly and do that. But what's the most important thing, when a machine gets logged off, it gets thrown away, and we get a new machine from the same image.
Yep.
So basically, updating is going to be very easy. We'll just wait for users to log off, and as soon as they come back, they'll get a new machine from the new image.
We could use force for this environment, right? Nobody's logged on.
Here,
Okay.
nobody's used, so yeah, we could log off. All right, and we'll finish to complete this. Right, so it takes a while for the image to update. While it's busy with doing that, you get a nice little progress bar in the bottom here. But as we can now see, we're using Instant Clone image version 2, and the state is published. So best we do.
Let's log on.
Let's log on and see if it actually works. Always an exciting moment, isn't it?
True.
So we'll be using the.
Never doubt your skills.
Never doubt. I'm in no doubt, man. All right. So I'll be logging on. Using the HTML5 client, here's our production pool. And now we should be able to get a desktop. This is looking pretty good. I see some dem settings.
Cool.
So we should be seeing desktop shortcuts. And we should see some start menu alterations. So
True. And we added the power button.
Yes.
With the GPO.
Yeah, we sure did. So let's take a look at that. Well, first things first. Here are a lot of shortcuts. Interesting, the self-support we haven't talked about. Could you explain that?
The self-support is pretty self-explanatory when you open it.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see various kinds of settings, which are the zip files I talked about earlier in the Lightboard video. And with this, you have the option to reset it or restore a backup from a previous date. The restore option is now grayed out because this is the first time we log in. But yeah, if something breaks, if an application doesn't work like you would want it to work, you can press the reset button and it will go back to the best state.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great, giving users power, and probably saves you a lot of time on the phones.
Yeah.
So you messed with my power button because I don't have any more power options available.
Great.
That's great. And when I go to shut down or sign out, I only have the option to sign out now. So our policies are working, the Dynamic Environment Manager is working. I think we're on a roll here.
Yeah. So I think this concludes our third episode.
Definitely.
In the next episode, we're going to talk about app volumes. We're going to load applications onto the VDI platform. If you want to click along, make sure you have another Windows 10 virtual machine ready, and you download the app volumes installer from myvmware.com. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Sander.
You're welcome.